Welcome to taking the tradition on with a brand new series. Hurrah! Um, this is series 6. I can't believe we've been going this long, which is really exciting. Um, and the theme for this series is wondrous creatures. And we are kicking off with those fantastic denizens of the sea, mermaids. Taking the tradition on tonight is free. Taking the tradition on is always free. You can join us live. It's brilliant to have all the people in the room here live. But if you're watching afterwards, you are welcome. You can watch whenever, wherever you like. And that is with the help of my fabulous, wonderful patrons. So thank you very, very much to the patrons that make this happen. You are completely wonderful. And I love you all. You are utterly, utterly marvellous. So the chat is up. Feel free to join in to ask questions on the chat all the way through. I will be keeping an eye on it or do my best to. If I miss a question because I'm just deep in conversation with Jason, we will have time for a Q&A at the end. So if I've missed it in the things that you want to know, there will be a chance to ask at the end as well. We're going to be here for about an hour. It's an Amy hour, so I'm not promising that we're going to finish dead on the end of an hour. We'll see how the conversation takes us. It will be conversation and storytelling. This is definitely an in-conversation evening. So if you've come up expecting a whole hour of mermaid stories, it's not a performance in that way. It's an opportunity to get to know the storyteller and why they choose the stories that they tell, and to hear the story behind the stories, the story behind the storyteller. And tonight, we have a very fabulous storyteller who I've really enjoyed getting to know and working with over the last couple of years. Like many other people, I got to know Jason Buck better in lockdown. He's been performing in person all over the place for years. But in lockdown, he was doing shows every day and created an incredible, strong story community, a really beautiful place for people to drop in. And it became quite an arty community as well, with his stories inspiring people to take up musical instruments again and visual art again. And that community is still carrying on. And obviously, all people are welcome to join it at any point. I was wondering what to say about Jason, and I just thought I'd take some of the quotes that I've got about him. There's it's always interesting quotes online. So, Jason Buck, not the best beard on a bard, but the best bard with a beard. Quite like that one. Um, should be in the Guinness Book of Records for the most sound effects in one story, or more sound effects than a 100-year-old parrot on a world cruise. Jason Buck, a man made of myth, magic, and mead. His stories are filled with adventure, his beard is full of unexpected twists, and his tankard is filled with a poet's brew. So, put your hands together for the man himself, the wonderful Jason Buck. Whoop, 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 whoop.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Hello to all those of you I know, and hello to those of you that I have yet to meet, and those of you I've met tonight. Hello. Those are some nice things, Amy.
We're getting more quotes now. Yes. David Phelan is very tall.
It is actually a weird thing because when I do a lot of online shows and then I go and do a live show and then somebody sees me. I mean, I'm 6'4", and then people sort of say, and of course their face changes as they realise what they've just said. But they do that thing of sort of saying, "Oh, you're an awful lot taller than you look like on a computer screen." And then, well, yes, I am. Yes, I am. There we go. Yeah, 6'4", but not when I'm sat down on the telly. There we go.
Probably better than that, than the whole Tom Cruise thing where everybody goes, "Oh, you're a bit short."
Absolutely, yeah. Not quite what I expected. No, so
Oh,
yes, yeah.
oh.
No, that's all right. Yes,
Right.
it's been a lot of fun getting to know you, Amy, as well. And I think we met up face to face when I wintered in Shropshire for 6 months or so between houses, and we went for a
I
nice long
know
walk on some earthworks.
that was very sort of, kind of bit avant-garde of us really, meeting for the first time in person.
I know it was crazy. Well, I moved, and I just saw your little roundel on Facebook, and it just said Shropshire folk tales. I went, oh yeah, oh hello. I've just moved to Shropshire. Would you like a coffee and a cake? And there we go.
Well,
And
this is it. So we met on an ancient on H hill fort,
yeah,
and yeah, well, you know what it is when two storytellers get together, you just can't stop them talking. So we've had to carry on being friends because there's just too much to say.
yeah, we're still going.
Yes, which leads us on to tonight. So mermaids,
Yeah,
and well, lots of people have a thing about mermaids, but there's lots of different things that people have about mermaids.
yeah.
People who know me will know I like a mermaid, more of a Selkie girl myself, so I'm quite interested in your take on mermaids because mermaids and
Mm.
Selkies, different things. Um, but you were saying it kind of started with being terrified when you were small of kind of the ocean and the things that live in it.
Yeah, I think this. I mean, obviously, I've always had an active imagination, but definitely when I was very young, I used to have recurring nightmares. Not the same nightmare again and again, but the theme was definitely very clear, and it was things in the water, and it would be either the ability to sort of to look down into deep water to see the things that are down there, the things that are sitting on the seabed. A bit like the kind of the nice version of that is when you go to an aquarium or a sea life centre and they have the ray pool and you can see things. But it's like that. But there were awful things lying at the bottom of the water. Or the thing that came up again and again in my dreams was cephalopods. And if you don't know what they are, that's squid, cuttlefish, nautilus, and all the little things with the betentacled faces, the Cthulhu betentacle, and there would be giant squids, things that would perhaps be coiling me in and dragging me down, or even clever ones that were talking to me like a kind of a dragon. But it was always that thing about being from the deep. I think that
That's
other
really interesting
element.
because when you said about being frightened of things, you know, from the deep and from the water, I I assumed, obviously now completely wrongly, not the aquarium thing at all, but of that thing of just that all of that space beneath you that when you're swimming you're generally on the top and just kind of being more and more aware of that depth getting bigger and bigger below you and not being
Yeah.
able to see what's coming and that thing of being
Oh.
grabbed and not being able to see and that would because that was obviously would be my fear, you know, in the same way that as a child, and I thought this was really weird when I was little, but apparently it's really common, that thing of being frightened to go to the loo in case the tarantula would come up and bite me bum,
Oh
um
God. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no.
because but that
I've
depth
heard of this. Yes.
and not being able to see. Um, but your thing is looking down and
Yeah.
like and
Well, it's
the I suppose the
it,
anticipation of it getting closer.
Oh, it's both. It's both. I think there's a thing of absolutely opaque water that when you jump into it, you can't really see your feet. I've been wild swimming a few times here, and my partner Kimbers is quite a fan of wild swimming. And of course, we know there are various monsters that float by at the moment. But the sort of the sort of things that there would be things I couldn't see, and that would be in freshwater. It's lampreys, it's pike, it's the hands of the dead who've got caught in the weeds at the bottom, the things that I can't see. But also at the same time, when I was in Greece once, I went on a boat trip. You know, everybody goes together. All the terribly bright red British tourists get on a boat, and you go out to the middle of the ocean, and we all jump off and swim around a bit. And it was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. Into that water, and then swimming down as far as my breath would let me, and looking around and being able to see the seabed some way beneath me, and being able to see what I presumed then was a far distance away from me, there not being anything approaching. But then suddenly, the part of my brain went, "You'll see it from a distance this time. You'll see it coming. You'll see, yeah, and you know, this is its element. It'll be with you faster than you can get away." And then suddenly thinking, "Oh yeah, that's yes, you're right. Now I can see everything." So either or. So I mean, I like swimming. I like being in the water, and I like creatures from the water. But there is always that knowledge of that I will be the first one to be taken by a giant squid off the coast of Devon or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you're putting Nerissa off the water, I think, already. So
Um,
we all thought we were coming here for sort of it's going to be a nice thing about lovely mermaids, and we're sort of straight into
the horrors
oh,
of the deep, the
yeah,
dark ones
horrors
and
of
the
the
deep
deep.
ones. There's, but
So
so
how does this lead on to actually being? interested in mermaids rather than terrified of the
Rather than
water.
just terrified of the sure knowledge of the monsters that must be out there. Either you can't see them or you definitely will see them. I think the thing um, comes from when I was young. As a child, my parents and I we always used to go camping in Pembrokeshire a lot, and they were very sort of hikey, walky, craft placey people, and obviously liked stories and very arty and things. And so we'd always find out about the things and the local legends and whatnots and things. And of course, there's all those wonderful legends about sea monsters and mermaids being all over the world, whether on the coast or fresh springs or whatever. But I think the mermaid thing for me is about they because the idea in the stories, most mer people and most stories can talk and can converse. They're like us, but they're fish from the waist down. But apart from that, they are, they're like us. They would be like us. So if I could only find that point in the tide where it's out far enough for me to be able to go just around the base of that cliff and into that next cave, or into that next cove, sorry, and to be able to peep round before anyone else could, then maybe, just maybe, I might see a mermaid or a merman, hauled up on the beach or on a rock, or playing in the surf. And I think it's their similarity to us, but also their total otherworldliness that becomes magical. But then also the things that kind of come from mermaids, the mermaid legends, not just the traditional stories about talking to beautiful young women who are half human, half fish. But there was a program on TV. I don't know if this is the 70s or the 80s, but it was presented by David Attenborough called it was called Fabulous Animals. I loved it, and it was all about what today people might call cryptids, so sort of monsters and otherworldly beings. And mer people was one of the ones in there. And you look at the old woodcuts. There's a great series, I think they're German woodcuts, of the different types of mer people beneath the waves. And there's a mer monk and a mer bishop, as well as a mermaid and a merman. And they're kind of obviously sort of total things of fantasy. But it's lovely because there would have been some people who would have read those books and those bestiaries and looked at those pictures and thought, right, so that's down there. Okay, well, these guys seem to know what they're talking about. So, and it just becomes an accepted part of life that magic can meet the mundane.
There's so many otherworldly creatures in the sea that are real.
Yes.
You wouldn't believe, and you go, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, somebody describes an octopus to you, so
They have, they have nine brains. Octopuses. Oh, and by the way, it's octopuses. So because you have to pick Latin or Greek, and it's a composition of both. So it has to either be octopodes or whatever the Latin thing is, and then pi. So there you go. Octopus is what octopus people talk about. But they have a central brain, yeah, and federated brains in their tentacles. Sorry, in their arms. Apparently they're not tentacles again. Oh, no, squid. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, tentacles. And they have little brains in their arms, so that those arms can actually learn tasks that if that tentacle is severed, the octopus doesn't know how to do anymore. And scientists, lovely scientists, have done those experiments by teaching them to do something and then severing a tentacle, and then they have to relearn it with another arm. So there we go. Is that Cecilia Hewitt saying, "Oh yes, had David Attenborough's Fabulous Animals book as a child"? Yeah. Um, I mean, some of the amazing things that are down in the ocean. Have you heard of a barrel eye fish?
no.
This is great. I will see if I can find a picture um, while we're talking about it, because may I share my screen? I know I
Your
can,
co-host, George
but
Bielsa.
may I? Yes. Okay, so this is a barrel eye, and it has a transparent head, and the blobs there are its eyes, which are constantly looking up, but they're inside its head now, and so it looks up through the skin of its head up to the light above, and so it can watch for prey or predators above, and that's what it does, cruises around there. I mean, that's you
Well,
know
I have seen, and this is really sad, but a lot of my knowledge of the sea comes from watching Octonauts with my kids
yes. Oh, that was great.
because there's so many. the animal, because they just basically have picked all the best and most
Yeah,
interesting animals from the bottom
yeah.
of the sea, and now they've done the Mariana Trench, and we've been able to
Oh,
explore down there. The animals that are in the sea are incredible, and the vampire squid,
yes.
they exist. They're
Yeah,
amazing. So, to be honest, mermaids, I would say, are among
a little
the
bit
more
personal, aren't
tame denizens that you could get in the sea.
they? Well, they
And
are, but oh, go on. Sorry, you can say
well,
something.
I was just going back to that sort of magical of, kind of the just being able to go around the next corner and possibly be able to
Mm,
just catch in the right time
mm,
is I mean, I spent a lot of time on beaches doing that as well. But
yeah,
seeing the things that they're left behind, so mermaids' purses and
yes,
mermaids' rings and all of those things that are washed up that you find, and um not wanting to know that a mermaid's purse is really a shark's
that's
egg.
from dried up shark's
So
egg. Yeah.
actually, when I found that out, that seemed pretty magical as
I
well.
suppose that's still pretty cool,
You know that.
and it should be that. Yeah, the fish are living there. I wrote a poem a few years back, where when I was living in Shropshire, this lovely little cottage called Jack's Cottage, and it was absolutely freezing in the whole of the house, and anywhere except one room where the wood burner was absolutely freezing, and all covered in mould. But in this one little room, and I'd be going through sort of various bits and pieces, and I wrote a poem. It's too long and far too maudlin stuff to read out, but I was sitting by the fire and I realised I had a stack of sheet music, which had been my mum's, who died back in 2010. But it was just a stack of sheet music, and it already had happened was going through and going, yeah, this is a good music book. Someone might like that. This is a good, and this is what was left. And I went through these sheets, and it was an interesting thing because I also had in my pockets when I sat down next to the fire. I sort of put my hand in my pocket, and I had it was a mermaid's purse, and I think it was a shell of some sort which was just opened, and they were still damp from bringing them back from the seashore. And I was sat on the floor next to the wood burner in my sitting room, with just this pile of rubbish that no one wanted, and I was screwing up page after page of musical paper, manuscript paper. That's the word, isn't it? Manuscript paper, and popping it in the fire to light the fire. And so I was looking at this wonderful sort of memory of my childhood, almost with the mermaid's purse and the shell still damp from the seashore, from those seaside days that never end, summer seaside days. And at the same time, looking through and seeing little notes on the music that my mum had written, little musical notations and little things. And then all of there'd be packets, and there would be, oh no, Rosalie Buck and sort of things on there. And it was just worthless paper. And I needed, I didn't, as I don't know if you're aware of this, people, but storytellers don't tend to be rich, and so I needed things to light my fire. So I sat and lit my fire, my winter fire, with sort of, it felt like childhood memories of music and the seashore all sort of coming together, and then my house was warm, and so my little family would be warm, and the sheets of that paper and the memory of the seashores all came together. And there's a lovely little, rather maudlin poem, which starts off with this cold winter I lit my fire with sheets of paper and sat with a mermaid's purse and an oyster shell still damp to the ocean, and and it starts off like that. There we go. Is that lowered the mood enough?
Oh, so we go much lower here. Um, but it's so I don't feel like we've moved on. So there's the fear,
Yeah,
and then there's the magic of going round the corner.
yeah.
And
So I think
is that the thing that you like about mermaids? It's a safe way of interacting with the sea because you don't have to go in.
I don't know. No, I think the thing is that imagining. I think, as I said earlier, they're very much like us. They just happen to have fish tails and they can breathe air and water, so they can live in this totally alien element. And down there, under the sea, down where it's where to take it from me and all sort of Little Mermaid, Walt Disney things. But down under the sea, right down in the depths, that's where they live somewhere, and they live lives as you and I do. They don't. they don't sit on hoards of gold. They're not flying through the plains of existence or floating in the clouds. They're doing whatever mer people do. I mean, the way they're often illustrated, mermen are often going around with tridents and nets, being perhaps very gladiatorial, but also hunting. And of course, the mermaids are traditionally shown, or often can be seen with babies and suckling the baby, as a human mother would. Although I think that, as I'm sure many people will know, that myth may well have been inspired by things like manatees and dugongs, which are, if you don't know what they are, they're just huge, cute, massively cute seals that live in freshwater because all the saltwater ones are now extinct. But they have, effectively, they have breasts up here, whereas most animals don't. They either have lots down the body or they're lower down. But mammals, they have here, so they will sit up in the water and cradle a pup. But if you've ever seen a manatee, it's a nice sort of grey thing with tiny little eyes and an enormous, great whiskery walrusy face without the tusks with that. So you've probably got to be at sea for quite a long time before you mistake a manatee for a beautiful young female anthropomorphic mermaid. I was rereading the Little Mermaid, the original, not the Disney version, the Hans Christian Andersen version recently, with a view to, I wanted to bend it out of shape because it annoyed me a bit. Um, it's in the story, in the original story, very much like the Disney. I've only seen the cartoon, haven't seen the live version. Everybody lives they all live in a castle, and they wander around, and they're all singing and chatting and whatnots and things. And I thought, I will create, I will rework this story so it becomes the abyssal Little Mermaid, because when it's down deep, they can't sing, they can't talk because um, you need air to talk and sing. I mean, there are creatures that make sound under the water, and those that sing like whales do it with the breath they're holding. The rest are all sort of clicks and grunts and taps and things. So I thought, right, well, so if the Little Mermaid can't speak, if she can't speak and sing under the water, how do they communicate? And this brought me again back to cuttlefish and the way they communicate, and they communicate with colour on their bodies, either rippling colours or stripes or flashing up particular colours to communicate. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if in the Little Mermaid she in fact was coloured and rippling and shining and with these striations down in the darkness of the deep, rather than wandering around chatting with her grandmother and putting oyster shells in her hair and living in a house where the idea is that everything has to go on the floor. But they can live in 3 dimensions. They've got height as well. They can move in. They can operate, at in different ways within the world that we just can't without currently really clumsy tools, jetpacks and things that don't really do anything like you would hope they would do.
Yeah, I think it's when you put it like that as well. I think, well, what is that? The pain of getting legs as well, of kind of just being
Yeah,
rooted to the one dimension,
yeah.
of just being really heavy all the time when you were
There's a
coming
nice
out of the water.
there's a nice quote by, I can't remember if it's a poet or philosopher or whatnot, but somebody once said about uh, us humans. We walk along the ground like crabs walking along the seabed beneath the ocean of air above us. And I rather like that because it's the same. Yeah, the crabs are all sort of tootling along, and most of them, don't get to kind of to explore or have the ability to kind of explore up and down like.
As mermaids do, they can swoop and soar. And,
Absolutely, yeah,
and Catrice is sort of saying she says, I think it's the liminality that attracts me to mermaids. They live within 2 worlds on the edges,
yeah,
and
yes,
and that's it for me. They're absolutely denizens of 2 worlds, but probably more than that, really. I mean, I live in Shropshire, which is the most landlocked county in Britain. I mean, Britain's quite small, so that's not saying very much. I mean, I can still get to the coast in a couple of hours,
yeah,
but we have mermaids here. We have freshwater mermaids, but water is always a portal to the other world. And actually, kind of, we have mermaids, but we also have ghosts of drowned women. We have fairies. We have all kinds of women that live by water that are kind of come from the same. They're the guardians of the water places. They are the guardians of that door between this world and another world. And so yes, there's that world where the mermaids live, but you can only go there if you're taken with a mermaid. And it's not
Yes.
just about your ability to breathe underwater, it's your ability to pass from one world to another. I mean, if you just dive into the water, you're going to find a muddy
Yeah.
bottom at in a shallow pond. You're not going to find all the wonders that the mermaid would tell you about, or somebody that's gone with them will come back and speak about. You
Yeah.
can't just um but it's water is magical, isn't it? It is that gateway
Yeah.
from this world to another world in lots of ways.
I have a little. I was going to start spouting about how I'm reading a book at the moment on practical necromancy, which is a brilliant title. It's actually called Underworld, and it's a kind of a, and it's actually a comparison of different underworld mythologies around the world, and how so many of them have so many things that are in common. And one of the things they often have in common is water, and that necessity for the human soul after death to cross or go through or into or under, but there's a passage into or through water, which seems to be, of course, it's not complete. It's not complete, but it's very common amongst other things. And I've just noticed, I think that Despina said about the Nereids.
Mm.
I've actually got it's a 2 minute video which I recorded, and you'll understand why I won't want to, why I don't tell the story. But there is a 2 minute video I have of a story about a Nereid. I don't know if perhaps whether you indulge me to share that for everybody.
If it fits in really well here, then yes. But I mean,
Yeah, it's the same thing, and there's a slight perhaps reason for it.
if there is a reason,
Um,
because I do want you to tell a story live as well. I want to
yeah, okay, I'll
tell a
do that.
story
Okay,
here.
I'll do that. If there's time at the end, I'll play this little video, and you'll understand why it's the video and not me telling live, because it's where I'm telling it.
Mm.
But would you like? I could give us I could give us part of one of my own mermaid stories, and perhaps some of that might explain some of that wonder. I will
I
give you
think it'd be
I'll give
great
you
if you told us one of your mermaid stories.
lovely. Okay, well I will then, and um, and in fact, this I wrote this. It's called the Pembrokeshire Mermaid, and it happens if you happen to have been to Tenby in Pembrokeshire, then you might know North Beach, where there's a huge rock there. But I'll give you this story, the the quick evening version. By dawn, the storm had blown itself out, and Iwan left his little fisherman's cottage and walked down across the sands to see what the sea had left him. He walked across the part that normally, under a summer sun, would be soft and rising and falling like little dunes, like a tiny desert beneath his feet, until he reached that part of the beach where, as the tide was out far in the distance, here the sand was flat and hard packed, and with every footprint pressed, the sand whitened around his foot for a moment, and then deepened again as the water flowed back, filling up the footprint he left behind. There wasn't much on the beach, to be fair, this time. There was plenty of seaweed, and he would come back later and he would put that on his garden to grow his roses and his potatoes. Good stuff, your garden, 'tis seaweed. But he was looking to see if there was anything special, anything really interesting. He couldn't find anything. And so he walked along and got closer to that great crag that rises out of the beach. Goskar Rock is its name, a bastardization of an old Norse word which means ploughshare, because the Vikings who landed there thought that it was shaped like a ploughshare, and there it sits, and there it has sat for hundreds, if not thousands of years. On the landward side, nothing much to see. But as he walked round the seaward side, there was something, a largish object that had been washed up and caught in the rocks, and, well, perhaps it was a log. Well, that would be good. It was big enough to to be worth taking back and small enough to be able to carry. He could saw it up and dry it out, and it'd be good for his winter stove. But as he got closer, he could see that it wasn't a log at all. It was a tail. It was a long tail covered in great crescent scales, and each one was blue, green, purple, and ended with two large lobed fins. Well, what was it? This was going to be some curiosity of the deep, or something that had wandered from warmer waters and become lost and died and washed up upon the shore. But no, as he came round the corner of that rock, he saw that up at the top end there wasn't a great mouth full of teeth or thick-lipped and great dark eyes. No, it was the upper body of a young woman, cold under the sky. He wrapped his jacket about her, picked her up, and took her back to his house. What was he doing? He'd found a mermaid. He'd found a real mermaid. But by the time he got her back to the house, well, she clutched his jacket to her to cover her modesty, but there was no tail, there were just feet. And when he said to her, "I'm sorry for asking, love, but I'm sure I saw..." Well, it was a tail, I thought. And she wriggled her toes at him and said, "And what if it had been?" "I don't know. Nothing really. Just want to make sure I'm not going mad." Now, there is a lot more to tell about this part, but essentially Iwan and Morwenda, as she told him her name was, lived side by side in his little cottage. I mean, he slept downstairs, as was good and proper, on an old sail that was bundled up to make a bed, and she slept in his bed and wore some of his clothes. But they shared a life together for a while. He would go out fishing, and when he came back, she would gut and prepare the fish and either cook it in the pot or prepare it for market, souse it and vinegar it or smoke it in the fire. There it was. Time went on. But one day when he went out fishing, he had been particularly lucky on this day, and the haul, the very first haul, had been a good one, and that was enough for the day. After he'd emptied that great bulging silver net into his boat and travelled back, there was his basket under his arm as he booted open the door, and he said, "Morwenna!" But he stopped in his tracks. Morwenna had been taking a bath. And of course, in such a small fisherman's cottage, this happened in front of the fire downstairs, and it was only to be expected that she would bathe when he wasn't there. But there she was in the bath, and there was her pretty body that now sunk beneath the suds, and sticking out of the other end of the bath was not two legs, but a tail. A tail. He stopped and he looked. And Morwenna didn't know whether to duck down and hide her upper half, or sit up and hide her lower half, and oh dear. "See, I've got a tail then," he said. "Yes," she said. "And what are you going to do about that?" Well, Yuan sucked in through his teeth and poked the fire a bit and put a couple of sticks on, and he said, "Well, nothing really. I'm just glad I'm not going mad." And she said, "You're not going to send me away, are you?" "Send you away? Why would I do a thing like that?" And he knelt down by that bath, and they embraced, and the bathtub overflowed. You know. Now, there's more to that story, but I won't tell you it just now. That's the beginning of the Pembrokeshire Mermaid.
Finding me pin. Oh, there's lots of things that I like about that. Though there's lots of things that I question.
Go on. Can I let my cat Percy in as well? Because he's shouting from downstairs, as he always does whenever I'm doing something online. Here we go.
They don't like to be
That was
left
the
out. Bring the cat in, it's fine.
yeah. Well, he
You know a
hasn't
lot
happened.
about mermaids, Percy.
Yeah, he'll sit at the bottom of the stairs and go no, no, and then you open the door, and then he'll swagger up the stairs, no, no, as
It's
if
all that
there's
talk
been
of
some.
fish.
It must be. It must be.
So
Um,
it's a yes. So I don't know. I don't know. I want to hear the rest of the story because I want to know why she feels embarrassed about being a mermaid. And
well,
I don't know if she's been
mm,
chucked out of of the life under the sea, if she's done something terrible under there. Definitely don't think she should be embarrassed about having a tail. I also wonder about him going fishing because I just assume that, mermaids have a natural knack for catching fish, but I could be
yeah.
wrong. Maybe that's
Well,
expecting too much.
I could tell you more if you want. When she does help him, effectively at other times, when after they become engaged. And he says, right, we can't live like this anymore. And she's, oh dear, and thinks she's going to be chucked out because he's been living in secret with him. We can't live like this anymore. So, oh dear, are you going to chuck me out and chuck me back to the sea like a tiddler? And he said, no, 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 no. I want to walk down the street with you on my arm. I want to take you to chapel. I want to take you to the summer fair. I want to be proud of you in front of everybody else. And so they contrive a meeting between him and his long distant, suitably distant cousin, who then arrives by cart one morning when he goes to collect her, and they get married. That is not the end of the story, but yeah, she goes on the boat with him, and she'll hop in the water and help him fish. Yeah.
Oh,
And there is a point where he does, to begin with, when he first brings her home, he's cooking fish because he's a fisherman, and he thinks, well, she's got to like fish, but and a bit of salt, I suppose. She'll be all right with that too. He puts that in the pot as well. Ewan and Morwenna are their names, but she has a strange accent, like an accent. When she speaks Welsh, it sounds like it is an older Welsh, much, much older.
there's lots of people wanting to hear the rest.
Shall I just do the rest?
Well, I'm tempted, but we might have more questions and things. And it's
Yeah.
so
Okay.
so. But that's a one of your penned stories, isn't it? Rather than a traditional one. This is your
Yes.
story,
Quite. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
which
And so I think
yes, it's also your expression
yes.
of how
Of
you feel about mermaids and that.
Yeah, of a trad mermaid. Yes, she's this wonderful thing from the sea, and it is that point where magic meets the mediocre, as a better word, the mundane, where magic meets the mundane, and the mermaid can do that. I think somebody mentioned earlier. It can actually have a foot in either world. You can't. You've got a fish tail, but they can straddle those two worlds between being magical, these things that can live and breathe and talk under the sea and live in places that we could, especially as people started to have mermaid stories. There were the places that people could only possibly imagine, whereas now we know a bit more about the ocean. Um, but also oh, um, also um, they're like us.
Yeah. Well, Nerissa's saying also she doesn't have to have a tongue cut out to get her legs and feet. That's really one of those Hans Christian Andersen things. That's not a traditional motif, as far as I'm aware. I've only ever heard of it from Hans Christian Andersen.
Yeah.
It's not a that yeah, it's not
No,
a
and
usual
that's the
thing.
witch's price. It's not like a traditional thing. She basically says, "Yeah, I could do that for you," but it's the sea witch's price. It's not kind of like, oh, if a mermaid wants to do this, they have to do that. She does magic, and that's what she demands as her price.
And Andrew and Julie saying yes. Some Scottish stories say they will grant wishes, and also they can be trapped
Yeah.
similar to selkies when they take the tail off. There
Yes.
are, I think, in a lot of cultures they are able to walk and swim between the worlds. That they can take their tails off in the same way that selkies can take their skin off.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
They don't need to make a bargain with the sea witch. Traditionally,
Yeah.
they can
They can just do that.
transform.
And if and
And
if she could have just done that, the Little Mermaid, the original story, would have ended with a much happier ending than the real one. And I don't know if everybody knows the original Hans Christian Andersen one, but at the end, she dies. She fails, the prince marries the other girl, and she turns back into sea foam, and that is it because she doesn't have a soul, as her grandmother explains to her early on in the story. So that's it. She goes. Um, Someone's put. I always wonder how you have babies if you're a mermaid. Well, yeah.
Fish
You,
manage.
sorry,
Fish manage.
fish. Actually, fish. They do very well. There is a. It has some very adult themes in it. There's a film called The Lighthouse, I think it is, The Lighthouse, and it's filmed in black and white, and it's about, and it stars, oh God, what's he called? Uh, Robert Pattinson, who's from the Twilight um, franchise, and Willem Dafoe with his wonderful craggy face, and they are both lighthouse keepers. But in that, a mermaid is washed up, and she is sort of there, and let's say that the younger of the lads gets to know her quite well in full fish form. I'll leave
Okay.
that bit there. But again, it's another interesting kind of modern mermaid story, where it's basically two men going totally mad in the isolation of a lighthouse. But it's a great film, very folk horror-y. Oh, there we go. Someone's kindly put a link to it in the chat. The Lighthouse, 2019.
Yvonne's saying they've got a freshwater mermaid in Cheshire who's into ringing a sunken church bell. There's another one. There's another one like that in Herefordshire. She rings church bell under.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, actually, she steals the church bell because they keep ringing at it and it does her head in, and then she ends up with it.
Okay.
He kind of curls round it under in the
Oh,
river.
there's a lot of stories about sort of sunken bells, aren't there, and being rung and things. And I know that there's a thing of some what were once on the edge of edge of the sea becoming either totally engulfed by the sea, it's towns or cities, and others that have become totally landlocked because the land has moved, particularly because of the movement of waves and the
It's happened a lot. I mean,
seas.
that's the thing. You've got all the stories of Atlantis, but then where I live, there's a lots of places nearby that have had places that have been drowned to make reservoirs.
Mm.
No,
There-
it's
there- oh yes, of course, absolutely modern ones, yeah. Um,
um those places exist, and there are places you can go and you can see the houses underwater, and then there's all the
yeah,
erosion, the plates moving, and everything else. And it's but it is the thing that the mermaids are like us, but they don't have a soul.
yeah,
And whether, but then they
apparently,
play with church bells, and whether that's them longing for a soul or kind of claiming and saying
yeah,
they have got souls, and it's
yeah,
um because in many versions they can't go into chapel to get married. They're not able
yes,
to step onto hallowed
to
ground.
holy
And
ground.
and it comes
Yeah,
into that liminality again as well of kind of, well, mermaids have the potential to be immortal. And if you've got the potential to be immortal, that's one of the prices that you pay for immortality, is that you don't get an afterlife, because this is your afterlife as well
because
as
you're different, because you're
your
special.
current life.
Yeah, oh, it seems like a slightly sort of overly authoritarian kind of view of things that are created, and I wonder if that's the same in other religions. But no, I think mermaids are always different, aren't they? Whatever it is, they are different. They are not us. They are like us, but they are not us. They exist, or they have been created by, or they live in magical realms, in realms that are other. Even if that is just by living in the water, that itself is magical. Oh, the other thing about
The
my
water,
abyssal I was going to say the other thing about my abyssal Little Mermaid was that if they're all living deep, deep, deep down there, all the nice little kind of Disney kind of kind of faces. No, they'd have to have massive, great buggy eyes, just to deal with the darkness, the small amount of light down there, and then of course with rippling phosphorescence to communicate. That would be fun.
and I think
Um,
I think that is one of the things, though, is it's one of the things that draws me to the water and to lots of people. It's that last great unexplored place in the world. Because
yeah,
yes, we're starting to be able to get to more places within the sea, but it covers, I mean, oh, is it what, 7/10 of the
something
planet?
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It's
I
covered with water. Yeah.
I know my stats are wrong, but I mean, like,
Yeah,
vastly more of our land is
it's
covered.
mostly, yeah, disproportionately aqueous planet. There we go. Put that in there.
And it's obviously by its very nature, it's fluid. So you
Yeah.
can't map it, you can't plan it. And it's like,
No.
even if you're looking at one space and there's nothing there, it doesn't mean there's going to be nothing there as soon as you've turned your back. And
Yeah.
so there is that there literally is alien life, down on the seafloor. There are species that work on a different respiratory system.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely different
live
biology. Yeah.
different, totally different biology based on sulfur rather than
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we don't need oxygen, and we don't need, yeah, because there's a couple of I was gonna say, yeah, a couple of things in the chat I just noticed. Somebody said, how about Christine said about how about mermen, and then Yvonne said if mermaids are related to anglerfish in the deep sea, it would explain why we don't see many mermen. And if I can just fish nerd on this for a bit, in some anglerfish, not all, but some anglerfish, the female is normally much larger than the male, and the male is basically like a little swimming reproductive packet. And in some of them, when they do get together and they finally mate, he becomes attached to her. In fact, not only attached to her, but is basically absorbed into her body. And so that he is just almost like another organ of her body that is just there, just creating sperm that will then eventually go through to her. There's no romance in this, I'm afraid. Nothing. There's no dinner, no date. That's it. Straight on, pop, and then zoop, becomes attached to the female anglerfish and becomes unmovable. Yes, there we go. So what are things there? So there's a thing about anglerfish. This is my This was going to be my promo picture. Should I ever tell the story? But um, I never wrote that story because I realised that actually quite quickly she gets legs, she goes up, and it's all about being human and
But
this
it's about,
desire to
yes,
be
I
human.
suppose it's about seeing humanity from the outside again, isn't it?
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah,
that's the other thing that I really like about mermaids and that appealed to me when I was little and still does really a little bit. Is that in some contexts, some folklore and some traditions, mermaids are mermaids. There aren't any mermen, and
yeah,
that's why they sit on the rocks looking appealing because they've got to sort of collar some fishermen,
yeah,
drag them down into the sea, have their end away with them, and then abandon them because they are like the anglerfish. They just need
that's
them
it.
for
Well, I love the romance
for
that you put in, the magic,
reproduction.
the romance, and the eroticism. And that's it. Then, boom, out the window.
Well,
Um,
maybe they do have eggs. They can have lots of babies at one go. So they don't
yeah,
need men very often, and it's a female
yes,
society. And
yeah,
you only just have this little glimpse of the outside when they're going, "Oh yes, come on,
yeah, yeah,
human
yeah.
men, because you're all shallow." All right, yeah. And
That's
then
it. Fair
so
enough.
you
Yeah.
don't get to know anything about their society and their worlds and their
No,
life,
you
which is probably
don't.
very complicated and purely feminine.
There was a little bit, there's quite a few fish and quite a few sharks and rays that do that as well. Where if there is no male, they'll just reproduce by themselves. But if there is a male, that's quite good every now and then, at least because you mix up the gene pool.
Yeah,
So you
just a
don't
little
you
bit
don't
of
end up with clones. You end up with
few
sort of
new genes.
new variety and thus evolution.
Well, then the other thing
Um,
is that occasionally, like with those fish, that you just get the female kind of gets to a certain age and kind of goes, "Oh, there's no males around. I'll
yeah.
I'll be male.
Oh
I'll,
yes,
I'll,
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll take on
I'll
that role. I'll
yeah.
grow into the male, and yeah,
They sort of grow a moustache and start smoking a pipe and wearing a hat and sitting in a forbidding study, that sort of thing. Yes. In my Pembrokeshire mermaid story, the explanation, the origin story of the mermaid in that is that she and others like her used to live on the land, in the land that used to exist between Wales and Ireland. And if you look at geological maps, it's a bit like Doggerland over between England and France and the Netherlands and that sort of part of thing. That was all land at one point. And then as the ice caps began to melt after freezing so much, then up went the sea level and flooded those areas. And so there's a little bit of very brief sort of backstory in there that when she talks to him, she sings a song to him. And whilst he can't quite understand the words, there's enough of it he can understand that's close enough to his modern Welsh that he can understand tales of once living in the summer lands where they would flood flood, every year and then recede, and people would be farmers and fishers. And then as the years went past, more and more water was there, and eventually they would be paddling around with their coracles to the high points that stuck out from the water. But eventually, their priests, their druids, as she says, because she can't find a better word, called down a magic from the gods so that they could live in the water, so they wouldn't drown. And so actually, they started off as people and then became mermaids and lived under the sea. I hate saying under the sea because all I can hear is the rest of the Disney song in my head. But yes, they then live under the sea, still kind of right instead of old huts made of wattle and daub and bent hazel, covered in animal hide. Now they live in cold coral grottos and caves beneath the sea.
It's gone very fast tonight. I was expecting that we would have more of you telling specific stories. I mean, you've been telling
Yeah.
stories all evening anyway, been talking about stories. Um, I did promise everybody that there'd be a Q&A at the end. So
All
we've had a few
right. Yeah.
questions as we go on, and I've always got more questions. Um, but if anybody else has questions that they would like to ask, this is the point to stick them in the chat, and we will try and move on to them. And
Sure.
as it was said at the beginning, um, Catrice, Catrice, I think she was taking slightly against the fact of me going, "Oh, you're not very to Tom, what's his face, the actor." Um, Catrice, I've never noticed that you are short because you have such a personality. You fill a room when you come in. So I didn't realise you were quite that short. But she was saying, she talks, her tongue makes up for her lack of height. And just was going, well, I'm not sure what the excuse is for my mouth making up for a lack of. Yes,
Oh,
I'm sort of 5'10", and my mouth is obviously making up for lack of something. I don't know quite what. But my point is, there are people who are equally as gobby as me who usually have lots to say. This is your chance to get in there and to ask some questions. Um, Andrew and Judy, this isn't a question, but a
yes.
comment, is saying it's interesting that manatees and dugongs, also the extinct Steller's sea cow, but lived in cold waters, are in the order Sirenia, derived from sirens in Greek mythology.
Yeah. Uh, Absolutely right. Yeah. But again, I kind of refer you to I think you'll have to be at sea for quite a long time before you're comparing a Cyrenian with these alluringly beautiful ladies of the sea.
It's
Um,
amazing what a bit of sea mist can do.
yeah, it's a long day on, it's a long time on ship. Um, of course, this and some of the stuff about the sirens, and I don't know how true this is because people have just to guess the sounds that come. Whale song can be heard through the hulls of ships, and when you've got nice, good, solid wooden hulls, you can hear whale song quite clearly. And so, of course, this sounds like something that you can't see is making this noise. And I don't know whether some people might not have put together the sound of whale song, hearing it in the boat, so knowing it's underwater, um, with the idea that it's that whacking great animal that you kind of see sort of surfacing and breaching and diving.
But why would you think that it was a whale?
Yeah, absolutely, because they don't do it out
You
of
don't
water.
see
They
their
don't go,
mouth move.
huzzah! Sorry?
Well, that's it. You don't see their mouth move. It's not like they're sticking their heads out going.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
No.
it's not something because and it's not like the whale song always appears at the same time that they appear either. It is
Yeah.
something if you don't see them. It's the whale song
Yes.
isn't
It just.
necessarily connected with the visual at all.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, There's another thing, fakes of mermaids that people have made. Of people often make things called, and I don't know if it's pronounced Jenny Haniver or Jenny Onive in a kind of the French pronunciation. But if you get a skate or a ray, which is normally sort of diamondish shape, if you snip it in certain ways and allow it to dry, because skates have these sort of this mouth and sort of nostrils underneath that look a bit like faces when they dry out, allowed to dry out, then lacquered. They were sold as mermaids. They were made by sailors and then fishermen and just sold as mermaids.
Yvonne was randomly reading the Padse Mermaid and Dumont last month, and her take on that was don't get on a mermaid's bad side. I think that's generally a really good idea. Like it doesn't really matter what tradition of mermaids you're looking at, kind of whether they can take their tails off or not, whether they
Yeah.
sing or not. Yeah, they can be they're quite dangerous.
Yeah. and that's where the magic comes in again, and that's the difference. It's not just a biological difference of them having tails. It's yes, there is a magic there because they have to exist in this other element. They are magic, and they have these other powers.
And they're wild. And I suppose that's the thing is, and I think for me, and I don't want to speak for all women, but I think for quite a lot of women, it's the they don't in some of the stories, I mean, like the one that you were telling, and some of them they do try and conform, but there's a wildness where they don't conform
Yeah,
and they don't become part of the society and they don't live by the rules and they are free and they will take their clothes off and have their boobs out and
yeah.
they they're wild, they're
And
intelligent.
so that's where we just sort of slip
That's
into the
part of the
conversation about
magic.
wild women. Yeah, wild women who buck the trend and refuse to conform, and therefore become dangerous, but also can become alluring as well. In the sort of traditional sort of Greek, in the Greek myths, in traditional Greek society, wives were often chattels, and therefore having children. You'd want a wife, you'd have children. Hope you have a nice wife. But they would have to behave in certain ways and be good, Greek or other whatever they would be Athenian women. And that's when you see Medea coming in. She's exotic because she's foreign. And she's a witch, but that's okay. She can be cool and sexy and do all the things she wants to, because that's all right. Because she's not a good Athenian woman, so she can break the trends and be exotic and sexy.
Yeah. Well, mermaids do that, but they sometimes they will come and live with men, but they also quite often leave. They don't always stay till the end. When they've had enough, or if they don't feel they're being treated right, they are gone. And but more often, like yeah, in the Mermaid of Zennor, they take the
Mm,
man with them. There's
mm,
far more stories about mermaids taking men into the sea than there are about
yeah,
men taking mermaids out of the sea, which
yeah.
is in and it is different. It is very different to the Selkie lore that I'm really familiar with. And I mean, obviously, the one Selkie story everybody knows is the one that I don't like, where and I don't particularly tell, but where the man steals the skin
Oh
and
yes, that's
hides
right.
it.
Coercive control, I believe it's called. Yes,
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And I
wrongful
think that
imprisonment, things like that. Yeah.
yeah, there is a mermaid version of that, but it's not the dominant story. The
Mm,
dominant story is mermaid singing or
yeah,
a man and a mermaid meeting on the
yeah.
beach. It's much more equal and it is usually the man that goes with the mermaid and that thing of kind of being in the wild and that because that is the other thing that there is so much sea. It's
Oh yeah.
just this wide open space. It's so free, that freedom of just being able to dive into the water and keep going, you know.
I've always wanted to see a bit like those children's kind of colouring things that you get sometimes, which show you lots of different animals all just crammed into the same place. What it would look like if you could either take away or see what it would look like without any ocean, but keep everything frozen in place, and then to be able to move around in there and see exactly what is there and the totality of, or at least some sort of idea of that kind of cluster and the multitude of everything around you, and the wonder of as it's things as they change as you move from place to place.
One
Do
of
you, do
my
you want to
fa-
say?
one of my favorite stories when I was little. I mean, I wasn't, that big into Bible stories, but before I kind of got, all the Christian stuff got a bit too much for me. But the stories are great, and
Yeah.
that story, the thought for me of going through the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea, and walking along the dry seabed with this
Yes.
kind of, and I was just seeing it as like a slice,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of almost like an aquarium wall of just being able to see everything that was in the
Mm.
water, and I would have got drowned because they're
Just
going,
waiting.
come on, come on, come on. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
gawping. I'd have been right in the middle of the sea gawping. Because what an experience, that once in a lifetime thing that
Yeah.
no humans before or since ever get to do that.
I had a little bit of that, perhaps not from quite as august publication as the Christian Bible, but Comet in Moominland, where a comet coming in, it dries up the sea, and they have to walk on stilts across the seabed and step over great big sort of chasms and things. And yeah, there's a bit where one of them goes to explore a sunken wreck that's got but in that sunken wreck is a dark pool, and in that dark pool is an horrible octopus. and so Moomin Troll has to rescue the Snork Maiden from that. But yes, again, that lovely idea of what would it look like down at the bottom. I recently reread, recently for my birthday back in April. My son, weirdly enough, both Kimbers and Son and Heir bought me copies of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and so I read that again, and which is it's a bit thick in places because it lists fish. And obviously, Jules Verne did a huge amount of research. But when you're reading Latin name after Latin name after Latin name of fish, but there is that idea that then about the men being able to put on these diving suits and step and walk out across the sea and seeing these giant shells and these giant crabs and things. I see some.
Oh, we haven't had any questions, but Caroline has been sharing her marvelous doodling again, and it looks fantastic. So if I can open it and share it. Uh, Let me see if I can. Uh,
I think I might know how to do it if you're not sure.
I've got partly there. I'm just yeah, if I can get it on my. Uh, I think I've got too many things open. It doesn't want to show it. It doesn't. You go for it. You go for it because you're
Okay.
very good at doing this, Jason.
Um, let's just open that there. And
I've
then
opened it, but it's not giving me the option to.
here we go. If I share that there, hopefully people should be able to see that. Wow.
And that's just got the wonder and the joy in it, hasn't it? I love that.
Yeah. What's nice is there's one with
Oh, thank
legs.
you, Caroline.
Yeah, thank you. And that's lovely. Yeah, and it has that feeling of the ability to that wonder of being able to just exist in space and to be able to move rather than having to jump or run or climb. It's just moving in three-dimensional space.
Well, it's the same thing as wanting to fly, isn't it? It's
Yes.
absolutely that 3D movement, being able to breathe underwater and to explore and to see all of the wonders that are there. It is sadly about time for us to
Oh dear.
wrap
Okay.
up. Um, we need to finish, but I don't know if you've got a last little snippet of anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to share about mermaids. Don't have to.
Um, I think. Sorry, it probably looked like I froze for a moment there. It just triggered when I forget. Sorry, who it was who said about mermen, and recently I told a story about a merrow, which is the Irish word for the merfolk, and I won't tell the story, but it's about a man who goes to look for the merrow that his grandfather met. When eventually he finds him, there he is, but he's dressed in coats of seaweed and things, and has scales and a tricorn hat, which would have been, I guess, what a fancy gentleman would have worn at the time it was told. And then yes, he gives him another tricorn, and the two of them go down in the sea, down to the merrow's house, where they sit and drink some of the rum and the wine that he's taken from the flotsam that's come in from shipwrecks. But the merrow there, the merman, is very human. He's got legs, but they're just a bit scaly. But he has souls captured in cages, and these are the souls of drowned sailors that he has caught, hoping to so they don't just float around in the sea. And the protagonist goes around, then keeps sneaking back in to kind of take them back and release them so they can ascend to heaven. But I rather like that kind of idea of, again, that totally sort of paradoxical idea of going into the Merrow's house where there's a nice fire, but it's a cottage under the sea. There's a nice fire burning in the corner, and he's got a nice dry cellar underneath, and the two of them sit and drink until they're all pie-eyed and have a lovely time. But again, that's all in the depths of the ocean, and that's proper magic. And one of the things I like about stories, and one of the things I like about mermaids, is that when you have magic, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to talk about the biology. It doesn't have to obey the laws of physics. It is just cause magic.
Well, on that note of magic, I think we're gonna leave it there. I've got a couple of things to just wrapping up, but then we could maybe
Sure.
finish with that 2 minute video.
Oh
Just
yeah,
finish
sure.
at the end of that and have that at the end. So I
Yeah.
think it'd be great. So just before we get onto that, Jason, it's been a pleasure for tonight. Thank you so much for coming, sharing your stories, sharing your thoughts, and for discussing and having an hour just spending it in the
Thank you.
company of mermaids. And obviously, you are one of the busiest men in storytelling. You've got loads of things coming up. Um, so you've got lots of stuff coming up in person. You've got lots of things coming up online. Where is the best place for people to find your events?
If you like Facebook, come and find me there because that's the best place because that's where all my events are and that's where you can chat to me and I publish and post things. Just search for my name, Jason Buck, and then Storyteller. Don't go to my private page, just to the Storyteller page. I'll be very happy to chat with you there. But otherwise, you can find me, Jason Buck Storyteller, on various websites, Instagram, and I have got some stuff up on YouTube as well. But Facebook's the best place to find me.
And there's lots of things coming up. Um, if you have enjoyed tonight, you can watch it again if you want to. If you want, if you had to come in late or you just want to check back on the stories or anything, it'll be up very soon on my YouTube site, which is Taking the Tradition On, and all the other episodes of Taking the Tradition On are on there as well. They're in playlists. So there'll be series 5, series 4, series 3, 2, 1. If you look on playlists, it's probably the easiest way to navigate your way around. I've tried all sorts of things to try and make the YouTube channel as easy to navigate as possible, and it's not. YouTube isn't always, but if you look on the playlist, you'll find the Taking the Tradition On series. And there are lots of great topics, lots of fantastic storytellers. Um, I will be back live next month with another storyteller. That will be on Tuesday, the 8th of October. Um, my patrons always find out who it is first, so I'll be having a little chat with them. And patrons, we need to have a discussion. So I've got Jason here. I will going to be asking. I need suggestions because I've got some people that I'd like to talk to. I've got some wondrous creatures I'd like to find out more about. But who would you like to find out more about? I'm always up for ideas and suggestions of things that people want to hear. Um, if you've enjoyed tonight, please do, oops, excuse me, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It does make it easier to find if you don't mind clicking that subscribe button. And you can find out more about me at Amy Douglas Storyteller on Facebook if you're a Facebook person. But for now, I think that's about it. Just good night. Thank you to everybody, particularly my amazing guest, Jason Buck. Woo!
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody as well for watching and listening and chatting and asking questions and filling in the gaps.
And we'll finish off, I think, with your
Yeah.
video.
Okay, I shall share that. I shall share that with you now. Just got to find it first. There it is. Oh no, classic. It even started earlier. See if I could one more go. There we go.
So, Nerites was the son of the sea god, the old man of the sea, and also the sea nymph called Doris. He was young and he was beautiful, so very, very beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that when Aphrodite, the goddess, was living under the sea for a bit, splashing about, having a lovely time, she met Nerites and she fell in love with him. She fell in love with him and then asked him to come back with her to Mount Olympus. Oh no, he said, I can't do that, I'm afraid. My family is here, under the sea. She was furious. She offered him a pair of wings in return for coming with her back to Olympus, but he said no. And so she gave those to her son instead. Her fury grew. Her fury grew until eventually she decided she could take no more of this rejection, and cursed him and turned Nerites into a shrimp. Now Nerites' sister, Nereid, one of his 50 sisters, found him in a shrimp form and realised what had happened and took him to the sea god Poseidon and pleaded with him, please, please turn my beautiful brother back from a shrimp back into the swimming sea god that he is. Poseidon, lord of the ocean and king of all the sea gods, said yes. And he released him from his curse and turned him back into the beautiful young thing that he had been. And Poseidon and Nerites fell in love. they too became an item together. Thank you. Enjoy your swim.
There we go. Apologies for the wind in the background, but that's what you get when you're trying to tell stories in a kayak on the sea.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.